Oakhaven was a quiet village. It was often too quiet. An eerie silence would fall upon the old houses and winding lanes. People whispered old stories. They spoke of strange things that happened there, in the shadows. The air itself felt heavy sometimes. Secrets seemed to hide in the deep woods surrounding the village. The ancient trees watched everything. They kept their own counsel. The village felt isolated, forgotten by the bustling world outside. Its quietness was not peaceful, it was watchful. Vijay was new to Oakhaven. He'd come seeking peace from the city's noise. Soon he noticed some men. They wore perfect white shirts. The shirts were flawless, impossibly white, impossibly crisp. They stood out against the muted colours of the village. These garments felt unnatural, almost luminous in their perfection. He found himself wondering about them constantly. Where did such pristine shirts come from in such a secluded place? They held a strange allure for him. Mr. Silas Blackwood made the shirts. He was an enigma to the villagers. He lived alone in a small shadowed cottage. His shop was rarely open to customers. Yet, his skill with a needle and thread was legendary. His white shirts were spoken of like works of art, desired by those who valued perfection. Vijay felt a strange, compelling desire for one of these shirts. It was more than a simple want, it was a pull, an inexplicable need. He finally made his decision. He needed one of those perfect white shirts. The desire had grown into a quiet obsession. He had heard the hushed tales about the tailor. They praised his skill, his unmatched craftsmanship. But they also hinted at his odd ways. He was very reclusive, rarely seen. Vijay tried to ignore the faint sense of unease that pricked at him. He told himself it was just the curiosity of a newcomer in a small, quiet village full of old traditions. Vijay gathered his courage. He went to the tailor's shop. It was late in the afternoon. The sun was beginning to set. The shop was dark inside. Dust motes danced in the few faint beams of light that pierced the gloom. It smelled strongly of old cloth, of aged linen and cotton. And there was another scent beneath that, faint, almost metallic, like old iron, or perhaps something even older. The silence inside was thick and heavy. Mr. Blackwood appeared from a back room. He moved like a shadow. He was tall. He was very thin. His eyes were dark, like polished chips of obsidian. They seemed to absorb the light. He listened quietly as Vijay made his request. Vijay asked for a perfect white shirt. Silence filled the small shop again. It was a heavy and cold silence, making Vijay feel uncomfortable. The tailor just watched him, his expression unreadable. The tailor nodded slowly, once. "Yes," he said, his voice barely a whisper. A white shirt. His voice was soft and dry, like autumn leaves skittering across a forgotten path. "You must come at midnight," he then stated. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "For your fitting. Midnight. Sharp." The request was undeniably odd. It sent a small shiver down Vijay's spine. Why so late? What purpose could it serve? Vijay felt a definite chill. Midnight was a strange time for a fitting. So late when the village was asleep, but the shirt, he wanted it so badly. The image of its perfection was fixed in his mind. He pushed his growing doubt away. It is just an old man's peculiar way, he told himself, trying to rationalize the strangeness. He agreed to the tailor's terms. He said he would go to the tailor's house at midnight. He would get his shirt. Midnight approached. Oakhaven was completely dark. It seemed swallowed by encroaching shadows. The wind was a low moan through the skeletal branches of the trees. Vijay walked through the deserted lanes. His heart beat fast against his ribs. The tailor's house stood at the very edge of the village. It was isolated, as if shunning the company of other dwellings. It looked like a forgotten relic from another time. The house itself looked almost dead. Its wood was old and weathered. The windows were dark, like vacant eyes. There were no welcoming lights, just one single candle. It flickered deep inside, a tiny, unsteady flame in the overwhelming darkness. The house looked like a waiting maw, ready to consume whatever came near. Vijay almost turned back then. A primal fear urged him to flee, but the thought of the shirt so close pulled him forward. He knocked on the heavy wooden door. The sound was shockingly loud in the oppressive silence. The door creaked open slowly, reluctantly. Mr. Blackwood stood there. A small, unsettling smile played on his thin lips. It was not a kind smile. It did not reach his dark eyes. He beckoned Vijay inside with a silent gesture of his long, pale hand. The air that wafted from within was cold, much colder than the night outside. Inside, the room was surprisingly large. It was cluttered with the tools of a tailor's trade: scissors, threads, patterns, and shirts. There were many white shirts, dozens of them. They hung on tailors' dummies, silent sentinels in the dim light. They seemed to glow faintly, their whiteness almost ethereal. Each one was perfect. Each one was identical to the others. It was an unsettling display of uniformity. Mr. Blackwood gestured for Vijay to stand still. He took out a long yellowed measuring tape. His fingers, when they brushed Vijay's skin, were like ice. Vijay tried to stay calm, but his gaze wandered around the room. He noticed something odd. On the collars of the hanging shirts there were tiny letters, faintly stitched names, almost invisible in the flickering candlelight. He leaned closer, curious. He strained his eyes to see in the dim light. He deciphered a name: Thomas. He remembered hearing that name. Thomas was a villager who had vanished last spring without a trace. Then he saw another name: Ilara. She had disappeared during the cold of winter. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Vijay's heart. These were not just shirts. They were like pale, silent memorials to the lost souls of Oakhaven. The tailor began to hum. It was a quiet, strange and tuneless melody. He picked up his needle from a small, dark cushion. It shone white in the candlelight. It was not made of metal. It was long and slender. It looked disturbingly like polished bone. Vijay's breath caught painfully in his throat. In that horrifying instant, he understood the tailor's secret. He understood where the perfection of the shirts truly came from. He tried to run, he tried to scream for help, but he could not move. He was frozen, rooted to the spot by an invisible force. The tailor's dark eyes shone with a terrible, triumphant light. "A perfect fit," Mr. Blackwood whispered, his voice like the rustle of a shroud. "Soon you will join them. Another perfect creation." Vijay saw a new piece of pristine white cloth laid out. His own name, Anant, was already faintly traced upon it. He was trapped. His perfect white shirt would be his tomb.